Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Coming Down to Earth with Spirit podcast with me, David Hale. Like with Season 1, we will continue talking about all things spiritual in a real and down-to-earth way. So I hope you can join me on my podcast journey so you can learn from my own spiritual journey and experiences with spirit in order to help you on your own spiritual journey and development. So join me now as we get into this episode. Well, hello everybody. I hope you are well. Thanks for joining me for Season 2 of my podcast. I hope you enjoyed the introduction episode and welcome to the first listener questions episode of Season 2. And as I said in the introduction of this season, the listener questions will just be a continuation from Season 1, and therefore we're going to start with this question, which we're going to number question 16 as we finished on question 15 in Season 1. So this question is getting to know a little bit more about me again, similar to what we did in the introduction episode, but this time it comes in the form of a question. So Joanne wants to know, as a medium, do you find it any different communicating with your loved ones in spirit? I've heard people say it's harder to communicate with your own family and friends in the spirit world. So a very short answer is yes. It is different communicating with your own loved ones compared to when you've got a client sat in front of you and you're communicating with their loved ones. Because although we're mediums, we're still human. We're human beings, and like everybody else, we miss our loved ones in the spirit world, and we wish them to be here physically. We wish them to communicate with us, and that can be the problem. It's the wishful thinking, because wishful thinking can create images in the mind. It can create conversations. It can create scenarios, and it can allow our minds to play tricks on us. So we conjure up these images of our loved ones in our heads, and then that's where that's where the problem lies, because then we question ourselves as to whether it really is them or are we just wishful thinking. And so as mediums, we then need to use what we call discernment to discern whether it is them in spirit coming through, or whether it is just our minds pulling in those images and those memories that actually we do have. So that's the difficult part, especially at the beginning of your development. But as you learn and develop and grow and experience more, you start to learn to trust, when it is spirit and when it's not. And I found that my own spirit family only started to connect directly with me when I'd got to a point in my development where they knew that I had experienced enough to know when it is imagination and when it is my actual spirit family. So they were very much in charge of it rather than me, if that makes sense. So again, they knew that David was ready at this particular point for us to start showing ourselves to him, and to start making that direct contact rather than me having to seek out another medium to receive that contact through them. But now at the point where I am in my own development, my spirit family do come through to me, and the way I see them is in the mind, like I would see your family. So if you're sat in front of me and you're wanting a reading from me, I would see, your family in the same way as I now see my own spirit family. But it's still a little bit different. So whereas your family would come through with lots of evidence and a message, my own spirit family, when they come through to me, sometimes it is just a quick flash of their face, so I know that they are there. And also I now know it is spirit, because the way I work, and some of you who've watched me on Facebook or had a private reading, you know how I work, as in when the females come through to me, they come through and they appear on the right side of my mind. And when the males come through to me, they appear on the left side of my mind. And that's just how I see them in my head, on the left or the right. So when I see a spirit family member coming through that way and they place themselves either side of my mind and the right side, I know it's spirit. Whereas if I just see them in the middle of my head, this sounds really mad, I know, but if I just see an image of them in the middle of my head, I know that's just my imagination pulling them in, because they haven't placed themselves on the right side of my brain. It sounds really mad, but I may do an episode on the mechanics of mediumship, how it works for me, but that's just basically how I see them. But what I do, I'm a devil. What I do, I test them. So I ask them, when they come through, if they show themselves to me and they want to say something, I will say to them, right, Nan, if that's truly you, give me evidence. Pops, my granddad, if that's really you, give me some evidence that it's you. Because I like to know, for my own peace of mind and my own personal development, I want to know that it's definitely them coming forward and it's not my mind just making it up or pulling in certain memories that I would know about. So I asked my spirit family for information that I would have to go out and validate and check with other people. So my mum or my dad or my siblings or aunts or whatever. So I make sure I get information. This is one example I want to give from my nan. So my mum's mum. So my nan, firstly, was the one who influenced me to write my debut book, Coming Down to Earth. And that came through by way of gut instinct and just having a thought constantly placed in my mind to write this book. And I know that was my nan because I remember when the information was coming through, I would see my nan in my head, and my nan was a reader. She liked her books. And I never thought in a million years I'd write a book. I wasn't a big fan of reading as a kid because I'd rather be out doing something else or dancing or listening to music or with my friends or whatever. So I'd never thought in a million years that I would write a book. But the thought kept being placed in my mind to write a book to the point I had to write the book. And so I know that was my nan's influence. That was one way she got that information through to me. It was through gut instinct, intuition, and that thought being placed in my mind over and over again to the point of irritation. But this particular situation I'm going to explain was just over a year after my nan had passed, and I sat in meditation and I could see her in my mind's eye to the right side of my head, and I was hearing her talking to me in an Irish accent. And I don't always hear accents, but I can always hear her talking. And again, at that point, you're kind of like, am I making that up? Or, what is it? Am I just wishful thinking here? But I allowed it to play out. And what she was doing was she was giving me encouragement to keep on going and doing this work. And then it was almost as if she preempted that I was going to ask her for evidence. And so she reeled off all these birthdays. But the thing is, I have a memory for birthdays. I tend to know all of the birthdays in at least in the immediate family. So for me, it wasn't really evidential because I know those birthdays. And so I asked her, I said, Nan, I know the birthdays, so can you give me something else that I would not know, so I know that it's you? Give me something I wouldn't know. So with that, she said to me, the tin of buttons. And then she said, she gave me simply the little skirt. I get, it sounds really random, I know. And then she randomly said she was in 8 hours of labour. And I thought, who was? I don't know what's going on here. So I had no idea what she was talking about, but I thanked her and I ended the meditation. I then got straight on the phone to my mum and I told her what Nan had said. And my mum confirmed that she does have the tin of buttons that belonged to my nan in her bedroom, because she had been looking at some stuff in her bedroom a couple of days before, because my mum had kept a lot of things of my nan's from after she passed. And my mum had that tin of buttons in her bedroom. I had no idea. So I know that wasn't a memory. I had no idea that my mum had a tin of buttons. I don't live at home. I haven't lived at home for a number of years. And so I know that was my nan give me the evidence that was her. When it comes to the little skirt, my mum had again been looking through drawers or clearing out or doing something, and she pulled out a drawer and there was the little skirt. It's a little skirt that my mum had kept, and it's one that she made when she was at school, I guess in home economics or something, a little skirt that she had made, and she'd found it randomly in a drawer under her bed when she was clearing stuff out. Again, there's no way on earth I would have known that, never seen it, didn't know she had it. And again, that's my nan giving me the evidence that that was her communicating with me. I asked for the evidence, and so she gave it. And then when it comes to being the 8 hours of labour, my mum said to me straight away, that was you. Now, I had no idea that my mum was in 8 hours of labour with me, and even when she was on the phone, she counted on her fingers, because she knew, my mum's very good at all the dates and times and all this kind of business. She knew exactly what time she went into hospital, because I was the firstborn, so she remembers these things from obviously her firstborn child. She remembers the time that she went into hospital to the time that she had me, and the conversation that the doctors had with my mum at that point as well, again, because I was my mum's first child. So she remembers all of it. She says, yeah, the 8 hours of labour was with you. So again, that is my nan validating for me that that was her communicating with me, and she gave me the evidence that I asked for, that I had to go and check, and it was validated. So that's one way of how my nan communicates with me. In general, though, I've got to say, when my spirit family communicate with me, they don't really give me messages. I ask for evidence, or I just see a flash of them in my mind, so I know that they're there, but they don't tend to give me messages. My messages tend to come from my spirit guides, giving me advice and guidance and whatever. And if I want a message from my loved ones, they normally come through another medium that I watch or I go to see for a private reading or whatever. So, most of the time they don't do it. I just know that they're there. And on some occasions like this one, my nan did give me that little message there of encouragement to keep on going. Another one was for me personally, and this was my granddad on my dad's side, so my dad's dad, who I never knew. I've mentioned it before, but I was only 2 months old when my granddad Pete passed away, and so I never knew him. I didn't know his character. I'd never been told really of his character. My dad doesn't speak about him that much either. And normally, if I want to know something about a family member, I have to ask. People don't just volunteer the information. And so I didn't know much about my granddad, Pete, at all. But I remember, again, I think I was in meditation or something, and I'd seen him in my head, and he'd come through, and I did ask for some evidence again and a message. And he told me off, well, necessarily tell me off, but he did kind of ask me to watch my language a bit more. And I'm like, watch my language, because I do swear. I don't swear a lot in these podcasts, obviously when I'm doing a reading or services, but in life in general, I do sometimes have a bit of a dirty mouth, I've got to say. That's just how I blame my parents, I blame my mother. She came with for saying that. But I don't know why he was saying it. As in, I didn't know if he did swear himself, whether I don't know. So I did ask my mum and my dad about it, and they said, no, he didn't swear. He wasn't his opposite to your dad. Well, my dad does swear, trust me. But no, he was opposite to your dad. He didn't swear. He was actually quite a placid, laid back kind of man. No one really heard him swear or have a bad word come out of his mouth like that. So that I would understand now. I understood then why he was telling me to watch my language. So yeah, so spirit do pick up on things and hear things. So that was another little message that my granddad and spirit gave me. Have I taken heed of that? Not necessarily. So that's kind of in general how my spirit family communicate with me personally, with personal messages and things. Now, when it comes to communication for other family members, so like readings and things, when I first started developing, I refused to do any readings for family members or close friends. Now, some people thought that was strange because they thought, you're just practicing. When you're doing practice readings, practice on people it's easier because you're more comfortable. But for me, I didn't find it easy because I wanted to test my ability. And from my point of view, doing a reading for a family member or a close friend doesn't test my ability because I know a lot. And yet my auntie did say to me, look, you don't know everything. I don't, that's true. However, I know a lot, and I have memories of my grandparents and friends and my uncle, and my stepdad and all that kind of business. So if something came through from them, I would then be questioning, okay, is that my memory pulling that information in, or is that genuinely something that I don't know? And also, I've been doing my family tree for the past, 14 years at this point. So even, back then when I first started developing, I'd been doing it 9 or so years, 8 or 9 years. So again, I still knew names of people and what certain people did for a job and how they died and that kind of thing. So it wouldn't test my ability, and I'd constantly be questioning myself. So it didn't help. So I didn't do any readings for family or friends for a long time. But even now, I still don't tend to do them, again, because of the same fact. But then also on top of that, and any of you listening who are developing mediums, many of you may get requests from family and friends to do a reading for them, and that's fine. It's completely up to you if you do them. But where I am at this point is in my own life development. I do, if a family member does want a reading, I normally refer them to or suggest they go and see another medium, which isn't me, because as well as the memories that we have, and that wishful thinking, what your family and friends need to also realize is how difficult it can be for you and how it can affect you emotionally. Because let's say your mother's mother, so your grandmother, had passed and your mum wants to hear from them, they don't seem to realize that also you want to hear from your grandmother as well. So if your grandmother comes through with something quite emotional, it's going to affect you. And when you're reading for someone, your job is to pass on the information as clearly as you can. And when you're too emotional, it can distort that excuse me, it can distort that process. And so it's hard for us as mediums to pass on those messages from our loved one in spirit to our loved one that's here physically. Does that make sense? So I refuse to do them. But also, there are things I don't want to know. There are some things I'm not meant to know. So if my stepdad was to come through for a message from my mum, there might be something personal in there that I don't really want to pass on, or I don't really want to know what they got up to and what, and what else he wants to say that might be quite personal to her, because that's my mum's business. That I don't need to know that. So again, that can be quite uncomfortable would be quite comfortable for me as a medium. So again, my mum understands that. But if little bits come in, I will tell her, but I won't sit down with her and do a full proper reading. It's just a awkward thing. It's a bit like if you went to school and your mother was, or your father was your teacher. It's a kind of similar feeling to that, I guess. But there have been a couple of things that have come through from spirit, from my family members, or from my mum in particular, which I did pass on to her, and it made sense. So my late stepdad, who passed in 2012, he's hardly been through to me directly or through another medium to me, for whatever reason. So I understand when people say, I want to hear from my loved one, and it's been a certain amount of years and I want to hear from them, and they don't come through. Same with my stepdad, he barely comes through at all. But there was one time he did come through to me, and he had mentioned something about my mum needing to get on that cruise. And I wasn't sure. I know what a cruise is, but I wasn't sure what he was referring to, because a cruise is not something I want to go on, and it's not something my mum had mentioned to me at that particular point. And then it's not until I had a conversation with her. Something's gone on my throat. I apologise. Maybe they're trying to stop me from talking. They're trying to shut me up. But not until I mentioned it to her after that contact. But she said, "Yeah, I was only discussing that with a friend the other day." So again, that's just Spirit's way of just letting my loved ones here know that Spirit are listening. So that communication was quite clear. It wasn't anything too personal. There's nothing lovey-dovey or anything like that. It was more to say to my mum, get on that cruise. And actually, in a couple of weeks' time, she is going on a cruise. So he got the message across, and she listened at last. And then there was one time, I think it was maybe around Christmas, I can't remember, but I was at my mum's house visiting, and I could feel my great aunt Mag come through, which would be my mum's aunt, so my mum's sister, my nan's sister. And my aunt Mag was very close to us all. She was a big part of all of our growing up. And she was giving me little bits and pieces. Again, I was still in that kind of phase of, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with this because it's a loved one and all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, she gave me some information, and then she said to me to mention to my mum, look at the tumble dryer. There's something wrong with that tumble dryer. And my mum was like, no, there isn't, because there's nothing wrong with it, and I did clean it out the other day. And I said, well, she keeps saying, check the tumble dryer. So she kind of went, okay, but I've cleaned it out and checked it already. Okay, fair enough. I'm just telling you what she said. So it didn't kind of make sense at that particular point. And then I get a call, I think it's a day later. My mum did check the tumble dryer, and there's a part of it that she did not check, which was full of dust and stuff. And she said, if I hadn't cleaned that out, that would have caused a fire. So again, in that particular case, my loved one in spirit and my mum's loved one was able to get through that communication quite clearly, which thankfully my mum did listen to. She did check the tumble dryer again, and she was able to actually clean it out properly, so it didn't cause anything more dangerous. So yeah, so that's just a couple of examples of how it has felt, or the process has been when my loved ones in spirit have communicated with me. So I hope that makes sense to you, Joanne. I hope it's answered your question, and for anyone else that has had that kind of question in their mind as well, whether it's for me or for another medium they want to ask. But yeah, I'm going to finish now because something or someone is affecting my throat here. So I'm going to finish this episode. Thank you very much for the question, Joanne. Keep them coming in, and I'll speak to you soon. Well, there you have it. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard and you found it interesting. There are plenty more episodes to come, so stay tuned, and I'll speak to you all soon.